everybody. Remember last month we had the jazz killer? Well, this month we've got the germ killer. We're going to go back to May of 1925 and cover a story where a man was accused of murdering somebody using typhoid fever bacteria. Along with that, we got a collection of shipwrecks showing you how hard it was to travel by boat in 1925. And also we're going to have a trip out to Hollywood to visit with three actresses who each have something interesting to say. So let's get going right now. Oh, and by the way, since you're here, could you like and subscribe? Doesn't cost you anything and really helps the channel grow. So let's go. The first story we're going to deal with is going to be the germ killer. And it's fairly complicated. Need a little bit of backstory here. Well, the backstory is this. We're dealing with a fellow named William Shepard. William Shepard is a part-time lawyer, part-time chemist living in Chicago, Illinois. He's accused of killing Billy McClintock. Billy McClintock was his young ward. He was looking after him. We'll get into that in a second, why. He was looking after him. And when he suddenly died of typhoid fever in 1924. Now, William Shepard knew a woman named Emma from high school. Emma had the good fortune of marrying a fellow named McClintock, who was a millionaire. They had a son named Billy. When Billy was 6 years old, Emma ran into William Shepard and they started a conversation. Shortly after that, like within a year, Emma's husband dies in a car accident, leaving her a widow. And for some reason, never explained fully, William Shepard and his wife move in with the widow McClintock, who is there along with his six-year-old son, Billy. Emma herself, the mom, the widow, dies in mysterious circumstances. She dies, could have been poisoning, could have been a disease. We don't really know. She dies when Billy is still 6 years old. That leaves the Shepards in charge of Billy, pursuant to the terms of Emma's will. So here we are. We've got a couple raising a young man who's going to inherit over $1 million. So somewhere between $30 and $40 million in today's money. And the Shepards are looking after him. Now, in 1924, when Billy turns 21 years of age, he becomes engaged to a lovely woman, a young lady named Isabel Pope. He has actually William Shepard complete a will for him 4 days after he turns 21. And in the will, he leaves $8,000 yearly to Isabel Pope to keep her in the lifestyle she's become accustomed to until they get married. He actually wanted to marry her later that year, like before 1925, but was talked out of it by Isabel, who said, you should get your education completed first before we marry. So there we are. That's the situation when suddenly Billy dies. According to the will, all that would go to Isabel would be the $8,000 yearly. The balance of that was going to go to William Shepard. That probably is where this would have stayed. It would have just been that simple. There would have been a death, there would have been a will, there would have been an inheritance, and that's it. Except for a fellow named Harry Olson is a judge, or was a judge, in Chicago in the mid-1920s. Now, he's a municipal court judge, and a municipal court judge is barely a judge. I mean, he's bylaw enforcement stuff, minor crimes, traffic offenses. In a common law jurisdiction, his duties would be performed by a justice of the peace. So he is a judge, but he's barely a judge. What he really is a pain in the butt, because he sees conspiracies everywhere. His brother, Harry Olson's brother, was a doctor, and his brother died right around the same time as Emma Nelson McClintock, the widow. And he always had it in his head that those deaths were related. He also apparently knew and didn't like William Shepard. And he got it in his head that somehow Shepard was not just involved in the death of Billy McClintock, but in the death of Emma McClintock and his brother. So he takes it to the police. He does all the legwork. He finds some evidence. The evidence is, well, according to the Detroit Free Press on April 7th, 1925, he actually had the body of Emma Nelson McClintock exhumed and had ran toxicology tests on it. And according to the Free Press, poison found in her body. They actually found some traces of mercury. For all we knew, she was eating a lot of tuna before she died, or for all we know that the graveyard may have had some residual waste from an automotive plant or something. It could have been anything. But the two bodies, and actually his brother's body was also found to have some trace amounts of mercury. But that was enough in Judge Olson's mind to point the finger at William Shepard. Now, he also went and pulled out all the files. Again, according to the Free Press, he pulled out all the files from the treating physicians of both his brother and Emma McClintock, and interviewed the doctors involved, and all the medical personnel said that they had never prescribed any compounds or medicines that contained mercury, and so to them the mercury was a complete unknown. But for Harry Olson, it was enough to point the finger at William Shepard. Now, according to the Chicago Tribune on March 14th, 1925, the headline is "Heir to Million of McClintock Held by State." So Shepard's taken into custody, and a fellow comes out of the woodwork here, a fellow by the name of Feynman, F-A-I-M-A-N. Never heard that name before. But what Feynman is, he runs something called the National University of Science. It's like the Holy Roman Empire. It's neither a university, nor does it have anything to do with science. It turns out that it's a diploma mill. If you want to get an MD, you enroll in his mysterious university, and a couple of years later, you are blessed with an MD after your name. It's a diploma mill. It's basically a fraudulent scheme to debunk the public. But he says, and his story is this. He says that the year before, William Shepard had written to him and wanted to know what. Said that he was a lawyer and wanted to know if it would be possible to introduce typhoid fever into a living person without their knowing it. He knows that you could do it by way of an injection, but that would hardly be not noticed by the person being injected. And Feynman says that he told him that it could be done. It could be introduced through food, and that would be sufficient to infect the patient. Now, what he also says is that Shepard disclosed to him his plan, that he was going to use typhoid bacteria to infect Billy, and that he stood to inherit at least $1 million, and that he would cut Feynman in for 1/10 of that, or $100,000, if he would supply him with living typhoid bacteria. Of course, this makes Feynman an accomplice to murder, and every bit as guilty, if in fact it occurred that way, every bit as guilty as Shepard himself. Now, interesting. So we've got Shepard being arrested, and Feynman also being arrested as an accessory. The Chicago papers, the Tribune here, are always willing to play up a murder case, make it as dramatic as possible, and they generally pick sides here. When you read enough of these stories, you realize that they pick a plaintiff or they pick the victim. The sympathies fall with one of the actors, and in this one, they sure didn't like Mr. Shepard. They go on here in the March 14th, 1925 edition to say that William Shepard was born probably in southern Indiana, but that he grew up in the slums of Indianapolis. It goes on to say that his mother was a fortune teller who read tea leaves for the neighborhood women. It also says here that Feynman liked to tell people that he enlisted in the military, the Spanish-American War. That's the one with Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. He says he likes to tell people that he was a war hero when, in fact, according to the Tribune, he never left the country. But his story was good enough, the Tribune says, that he was able to marry the belle of the ball, his present wife, and it was right after their marriage that he managed to hook up with Emma McClintock, and that story rolls in where he ultimately ends up with Billy McClintock as his ward. Now, all kinds of machinations going on here. Judge Olson likes to get his name in the papers, and in the Tribune of March 14th, 1925, headline is "Olson reports that sleuths try to intimidate witnesses." It says here, State's Attorney Crow was informed yesterday by Judge Harry Olson, working on the Shepard McClintock case. Now, he's not working on anything. They don't want him around. You get the impression that the prosecutor doesn't want him anywhere near the case. But he's working on it. And that there were attempts to intimidate and tamper with witnesses. He says that Feynman had told him that he'd been interviewed in a rather hostile manner. Well, that's the nature of the game. But the prosecutor has to have their own investigative department. It's called the police. The defense on cases like this is going to hire private investigators to interview all the witnesses. So we're going to try to figure out what's going on. But apparently Olson thought it was a little too aggressive. Also, and this couldn't possibly have happened, but Olson says it happened. Mrs. Louise Olson, widow of Dr. Oscar Olson, which is Harry Olson's brother, who was a brother of Judge Olson, was informed the judge an attempt had been made to kidnap her. She said that soon after her testimony at the inquest, where she told of Shepard's visit the day before Dr. Olson died, she was called to the telephone and told Judge Olson wanted her to get into an automobile he was sending to her home and to come to his office at once. She telephoned Judge Olson immediately and found the message to be false. So she's of the opinion that car was going to come around, take her for a ride, as they say in mob parlance. Now, interesting enough, governments always like to do things that make it look like they're doing something. Headline of the New York Daily News on May 10th, 1925, Shepard faces loss of McClintock riches. It says here, bill urged to deprive him of $1 million legacy. What the bill being introduced into the Illinois legislature purports to do is to cut off any you can't profit by a criminal activity. Like you can't murder and then claim the inheritance. That's what they're trying to do. But the bill, even if it was passed, wouldn't apply to Shepard because his actions all took place before the legislation would have gone through. There was actually a case back in the state of Michigan where they found out this fellow was 18 when he went to jail for killing his parents, both parents, and they found out about 8 years later that he was in receipt of orphans benefits. And again, that seems a little bit strange. They changed the law on that too. You can't kill your parents and then claim benefits for being an orphan. Now, it cuts both ways though. Working the press, the Wilmington, Delaware Evening Journal of March 18th, 1925, Shepard repeats denial, saying he's victim of jealousy because millionaire Ward left him his wealth. He does an interview with the newspaper, basically saying that it's just sour grapes, that everyone's persecuting him. And you know what? To a degree, it probably is right there. It's Judge Olson and the sour grapes that are forcing this issue along. Headline: the New York Daily News, March 19th, 1925. Shepard ordered to prison. 5 poisons used on McClintock state charges. They're reading the indictment and they're alleging that he used not just typhoid, but 4 other poisons. Just in case the first 4 didn't work, there was still the 5th one there. So that's the prosecution's case. Always fun stuff going on here. Minneapolis Star, May 29th, 1925. Headline: missing key witness says he'll return for Germ trial. How an attempt was made at midnight to assassinate him for refusing to favor the defendant in the Shepard McClintock murder case was told today in a letter received by the state's attorney and purporting to have been written by Robert White, missing key witness for the prosecution. The letter included the statement that the attempted assassination followed the writer's refusal to accept $5,000 for repudiation of his identification of Shepard as a caller at Feynman Germ College. They call you Feynman Germ College is cute. But anyway, so this is another time here. This is another case here where they are alleging that a witness was being bribed. Or in other ways manipulated. But he says he's coming back. He'll return for the Germ trial, and the Germ trial goes on. Headline of the Chicago Tribune, June 19th, 1925. Defense rips into Feynman. This is tough, man. Feynman is their really only solid witness who says he knows about whatever conspiracy allegedly went on. But he's had to become a state's witness. The state can't vouch for his evidence. They can't just use him as a normal witness because he's in this matter. He's already admitted that he provided the murder weapon to the murderer, so he can't. His evidence is tainted at best. And in the machinations of court that day, what goes on is they ask him, well, what are you getting for, what's the state giving you for giving this evidence? And he admits that, well, I'm getting some consideration. They'll ask him, what consideration? He goes, full immunity. So he is, if the story is correct, he's as guilty as Shepard is. He's a murderer, but they're letting him off completely if he gives this evidence. That has got to have a huge impact with the jury with respect to the credibility of this witness. And so if you're going to rely on evidence like that, you otherwise better be like a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout, because any small character flaw is going to be magnified by the situation that you're in. And so is Feynman a fellow of perfect character? Hardly. They get him on the stand to admit that his university is basically a diploma mill, that it really doesn't teach anybody anything. It's just a method of turning money into degrees for people. It is basically a fraud. And the best that the defense, the best that the prosecutor can say is that, yes, my man is a fraud and a charlatan, but he's not a perjurer. So you're asking him, we know he's told 1,000 lies, but you're asking him on this one lie, on this one last statement about the 1/10 kickback for providing the typhoid bacteria, that I'm telling the truth about. Everything else in my business dealings that is not truthful, but don't look at that. Nothing to see here. I'm truthful. Well, we'll see what the jury has to do with that. According to the Chicago Tribune, June 25th, 1925, Shepard asserts his accusers are lying. Olson is assailed by Stewart, who is the lead defense judge. In summations for the trial, the Chicago Tribune has a nice way of phrasing it. Words of denunciation of William Darling Shepard resounded throughout the courtroom of Judge Thomas Lynch during the forenoon of yesterday. And then words of denunciation of the witnesses who had testified against William Darling Shepard echoed throughout the same courtroom yesterday afternoon. So in the morning, the prosecutor has his say to call everyone liars, and in the afternoon, it was the defense's turn. They conclude with their arguments were directed to the 12 jurors who had heard all the evidence pro and con. Each lawyer was drawing on his inferences from the testimony. Each was offering his personal view of what the witnesses said and what he meant. Each had his own opinion and expressed it of the truthfulness of the various witnesses. Two different approaches here. The prosecutor is very, very methodical, very workmanlike. It's noted here in the Tribune that Mr. Gorman was doing his best to convince the jury that the state had proved Shepard put typhoid germs in McClintock's drinking water. When he ended, Mr. Stewart had the opportunity to analyze the evidence for the jury's benefit, taking it apart and weighing each bit. So he had a scientific approach to law. Stewart would have none of it. The defense attorney's an entirely different guy. Every time we seem to do one of these things about jury trials in the 1920s, we end up back at the musical Chicago. And it is a situation here where, again, there's that one song, give them the old razzle dazzle. And that seems to be what we've done here. That's what Stewart's approach is here. The defense attorney, O'Brien, was frankly opposed to logic. O'Brien talked for only an hour, but in that hour, he did his best to ridicule not only the state's case, but the state's lawyer as well. O'Brien was an actor in his youth, and he was an actor again yesterday, seeking to amuse the jury, seeking to amuse the audience. He delighted in calling Feynman, the confessed accomplice, a perfect lady. He said Isabel Pope is a nice girl, and so is Feynman. Miss Pope, the girl who was engaged to marry Billy McClintock, did not escape the bitter words of the two defense lawyers. Stewart was kinder to her than was O'Brien, but neither of them spared her. So it's all show. The defense is all show. It's show, ridicule, an appeal to emotion and not to logic. Now on June 26, 1925, jury to get Shepard case today. So the case goes to the jury. And what's interesting here, there's an interesting picture, good picture here in the Chicago Tribune, June 27, 1925. Hopefully that's up on our screen right now. Jury frees Shepard of murder charge on 6th ballot. Well, at least they thought about it. They took six ballots before acquitting. And so the charges are dropped against Feynman because there wasn't a crime, even though he confessed to it. There's only one person who's not satisfied with the verdict, and of course that's Judge Olson. Olson, according to the Chicago Tribune, Olson insists Shepard case is not over yet. Chief Justice complains of prosecution. Olson goes on to say that the jury didn't have all the evidence, and that all the evidence would mean all of his evidence, and that if he'd been able to run the case, we would have got a conviction, and that he's going to continue on to appeal and appeal. Nothing happened. Olson really does appear to be a crackpot. And finally, the case goes away. What about the money? Well, it turns out there was more than $1 million out there. And what happened was William Shepard, it took 5 years to resolve the case. William Shepard was awarded $450,000, but he was responsible for $100,000 in legal fees and court costs. So he got $350,000. Pope mysteriously got mad. Miserable Pope got $350,000, and 10 cousins who had never met the deceased also got $350,000 spread amongst them. So I don't know whether justice was done, but it's hard to believe that he actually he tried to murder this man with typhoid. Seems that justice was done, and it also seems that it was an equitable division based on the facts of the estate. So I guess all's well that ends well here. There's a really nice picture of Isabel Pope in the Chicago Tribune of July 10th, 1954 on page 6. Olivia, hopefully you can get that up here as well. Now, let's go for a break to Hollywood. And it's interesting enough, not Hollywood itself, we're going to deal with Hollywood actresses who are gallivanting all over the world. First, the Morning Union of Springfield, Massachusetts, May 3rd, 1925. Paola Negri faces smuggling charges. Who's Paola Negri? Paola Negri, at the time, was one of the most famous actresses in the world. She's from Poland, but that didn't hurt you when you're dealing with silent films. All you had to be able to do is mug the camera. So she's one of the most famous actresses in the world. What did she do, though? Fails to declare jewelry and 16 bottles of liquor found in trunk. This is actually some big-time stuff here. Paola Negri, motion picture actress who arrived here last night on the Berengaria, was detained shortly after disembarking by customs officials on a charge of failing to declare 3 pieces of jewelry valued at 300,000 francs. Now, francs are at that time, I think were 5 to the dollar, so that's like $60,000. Ms. Negri was also charged with attempting to smuggle 16 bottles of liquor into the country. Can you imagine? This is a lot of money. 300,000 francs, $60,000, that's like 1.8 million. Look how she's treated. After a brief questioning, Ms. Negri was allowed to go to her suite at the Hotel Ambassador. She assured the officials she would appear at the Customs House Monday and pay whatever fine is assessed. Customs authorities are appraising the jewelry, which consists of, get a load of this, a large diamond bracelet, a 12-carat emerald ring, and an unset emerald of 96 carats. That's a big stone. And it's said to have once been the property of the King of Prussia. Looked it up. She was ordered to pay $57,000 in duty and penalties, which was actually probably the value of the goods. But she did it, and she was a woman of her word. She showed up and cut the check. But here's the true tragedy. When the Berengaria docked, the customs authorities seized 16 bottles of alleged liquor in Ms. Negri's trunks and broke them against the deck railing. She was fined $5 for each bottle. Remember, we're in the middle of Prohibition here, and we're going to do a bunch of series on Prohibition and the effects. We haven't really touched on it, but that's what you do with 16 bottles of liquor in 1925. Now, there was a very pretty actress named Betty Blythe, and the Times Tribune of Scranton, Pennsylvania noted on May 1, Betty Blythe, actress, kidnapped by nomads of desert in Palestine. Do you think this happened? Film star dragged from auto by Bedouins who wound her 2 friends. Betty Blythe, film star, has been kidnapped by Bedouins in Palestine, according to a cable received today by John Harding, her London agent. Okay, that sounds believable. Harding has applied to the American authorities and also the British to rescue the actress. Troops have been dispatched, according to a cable from Haifa. Ms. Blythe has been in Jerusalem for 3 weeks working on a film which a French company is producing to be entitled Jacob's Wall. 2 Frenchmen who were riding with Ms. Blythe, a Dr. Marcus, wasn't it Dr. Marcus? Wasn't that his name in Raiders of the Lost Ark? The other archaeologist. Anyways, and Edward Jose were wounded during severe fighting with the Bedouins before the actress was dragged from the automobile and carried away into the desert. That sounds a little much to me. I don't think she ever missed a meal or a movie. She was back working within a month of this article, and that would have taken that long. Just take the boat back from Israel. Now, here's a little tongue-in-cheek thing here, commenting on the last article we just read. This is from the Battle Creek Inquirer. Jacqueline Logan, film star, left Hollywood this week for Canada, where in the interest of press agentry, she plans to be lost for 2 weeks amidst the snow-capped mountains. According to Norman Spur, her energetic publicist, the mounted police will seek the celebrity in vain for more than 10 days before they find her starving and freezing in front of a big tenderloin steak in a warm mountain cabin. P.S. After staging the Houdini missing act, Jacqueline, according to her press agent, expects to receive a wire of congratulations from Betty Blythe, recently kidnapped, in quotations, in Egypt by Arabs. Well, I think the public knew that was just a publicity stunt in the old style. Now, here we go. We're going to do a series of things here. If you remember from previous episodes, I sort of have this standard line that in the past, and by the past seems to be like pre-World War II, society had a much higher tolerance for danger, much higher tolerance for activities for doing activities where you could end up dead. And getting on a boat was one of those. When's the last time you read or heard about a ship going down and people losing their lives? For most people, that's probably the Edmund Fitzgerald, and that's only because of the song. But that was 50 years ago. Now, boats do go down. Even large ships can fail, and every couple years, one will go down. Sometimes there's a loss of life, but it's not something that's constantly in the news. These are sinkings that all occur in May of 1925, and we're going to go through them here. Seattle Union Record, Japanese ship sinks. Tokyo, May 14th. 18 were drowned and 7 are missing when the 200-ton fishing vessel Fudo Maroon overturned in a typhoon off Oshima Island, southwest of the Bay of Tokyo. So 1 Japanese ship down. 27 drowned when rescue boat sinks. Well, how can a rescue boat sink? Aren't they supposed to be rescuing people? Brest, France. 2 lifeboats bringing in fishermen rescued from the wreck of their boat were caught in a sudden storm off the coast tonight and sunk. 15 lifesavers and 12 fishermen were drowned. 27. The news in advance, Lynchburg, Virginia, May 31. 44 drowned when ship sinks at Bosphorus. Constantinople, 44 passengers and members of the crew of a small Turkish coastal steamer were drowned when the vessel foundered today at the entrance to the Bosphorus. A violent gale in the Angora section has done much damage. Anyway, so that's it. That's it for them. 44 are down in that ship. But that's not the biggest one. 100 are believed lost as ship sinks. Japanese vessel is wrecked off coast in terrific storm. The steamship Toyomaru has been wrecked near Sahaha, Japan, in a terrific storm. It is feared that approximately 100 persons have lost their lives. 3 destroyers which were sent to the scene of the wreck reported no signs of life aboard the vessel. Now you might think, okay, that only happens in international waters. That's, it's not going to happen. Things aren't going to sink in, the Great Lakes, American or Canadian waters where modern technology and such. Well, here we are. Ardmore Daily Press, Ardmore, Oklahoma, May 3rd, 1925. 5 drowned as ship sinks following its crash with steamer. This is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's a big harbor, very, very active there. 5 drowned, many rescued as schooner sunk. A steamship damaged, 2 steamships ashore, and a crew still in peril today was the toll taken by a heavy fog, which prevailed off here for 2 days. So just get some fog and all heck breaks loose here. The Norwegian steamer Moldengard is a total loss as a result of going ashore on Pension Point. Rescue steamers were standing by this morning. The crew was in peril. 25 members of the crew of the steamer Azov, ashore off Cape Breton, were rescued by passing steamers. Boats are going down aplenty. Now here's one. Now we're broadcasting. We're recording this in the Ingle Nook. That's what this is behind me with the fireplace and seating. The Ingle Nook, and in the living room of Leslin Manor here on the shores of Lake Erie. And this accident here takes place no more than 15 miles from where I'm sitting. 9 out of crew of 16 drowned when Sandsucker capsizes in Lake Erie near Sandusky, Ohio. Rough seas and a shifting cargo of sand turned the Sandsucker Kelly Island over in Lake Erie about 2 miles off Point Pelee this afternoon, and 9 members of the crew of 16 were drowned. What's a sandsucker? I had to look that up. Well, you know what they used to do? Big ships, 200, 250-foot long ships would go with these, it was like a science fiction movie. They would go with a 3 or 4 foot wide hose, and it would go down to the bottom of the lake and would suck up sand by the thousands of tons. And they'd take that sand to Cleveland or to Detroit, and it'd be used everything from golf course sand traps to construction. But sucking up that much sand has to have some significant impact on erosion, on the currents. I don't believe that sort of commercial sand sucking is still going on today. But what's interesting, it was kind of dangerous because 10 years later in 1936, headline of the New York Times is 19 die in Lake Erie as ship capsizes, 7 of the crew saved, 250-foot Canadian vessel rolls over in 50-mile gale and lifeboats are upset. Men in the water for 10 hours. I guess that you don't want to be on a sand sucker. But then we finally get, remember, these are all in May of 1925. We finally get to the shipwreck we were looking for. And the headline is in the Seattle Union Record to Seattle, Washington, May 9th, 1925, 23 lives lost as ship sinks. Where? In the Mississippi, just south of Memphis. 23 persons, 17 passengers, and six crew members of the government river steamer Norman were drowned in the sinking of the vessel here late Friday. It was disclosed today after an all-night search. Among the passengers were some of the most prominent engineers in engineering circles in the South, including, then they list the guys. What it was there was a convention of engineers in Memphis, Tennessee, probably at the Peabody Hotel. And they went out for a pleasure cruise on a steamer, a shallow bottom steamer. It was supposed to be like Gilligan's Island on the Minnow, a 3-hour cruise. But something shifted. Ballast must have shifted. The boat rolled over. There were about 100 people on board. 23 of them drowned. And then through the courageous efforts of Tom Lee, this gentleman rescued 32 people. Now, who's Tom Lee? Tom Lee was a black man who worked on the river, and he had a rowboat. Tom Lee didn't know how to swim, but Tom Lee went out from the shore 8 different times, each time bringing back 4 people, till he had saved 32 people and there were no more people left to be saved. He's rightly praised as a hero. Tom Lee, now, if you're in Memphis, I assume you know Tom Lee. There's Tom Lee Park. Tom Lee, shortly after the tragedy, an obelisk was erected at the site of the loss, outlining the exploits of Tom Lee, a beautiful marble statue. Then later, a few years ago, a full-blown bronze statue of Tom Lee in his boat rescuing a drowning man is set up in Tom Lee Park. Well, that's great. They know it is great that the public recognize this man's heroics. But they went further. They set up a fund, the Tom Lee Fund. In reading from the Commercial Appeal of Memphis, Tennessee, June 16th, 1925, the Tom Lee Fund had already accumulated a grand total of $2,532.56. They were looking to get $3,500 to build a house for Tom, and they got there and they built him a house. They describe it as a double-sized shotgun shack, but it is a house. And you could build a house back then for that kind of money, the equivalent of $100,000 today. Way cheaper to build a house back then. You didn't have insulation. You didn't have electronics. You didn't have thermal pane glass. You barely had electricity. At best, you had a 60-amp service, but you might even have been a 30-amp service back then. You could build a nice home for $3,500 in 1925, and they did it. So Tom got his house. So he got his house. He got his recognition. I know that none of this he did for the recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And that was the great thing about Tom Lee. Now we're at the end of our little talk. It's time to make a recommendation of a cocktail because that's what I do. Appropriately, there is a cocktail called the Shipwreck. And I actually think, given the ingredients, that it should be called the Mississippi Shipwreck because it's just a spin on an old fashioned. It's 1 ounce of bourbon. It's 1 ounce of aged rum. Get some dark, strong rum so it cuts through the mix. 3/4 ounce of lime juice and a 1/2 ounce of simple syrup. Simple syrup, the recipes are online. It's easiest thing in the world to make. And 5 mint leaves for a garnish. You shake the ingredients vigorously on ice. You strain it into a highball glass filled with crushed ice, and you garnish with the mint leaves. It's daiquiri-ish. It's a great combination of flavors. I'm going to make one as soon as I put my book down here and say goodbye to you, which I'm going to do right now. But remember, we're trying to build this station. So if you could like and subscribes are really cool. If you could do that, it would be greatly appreciated. And so we'll see you next week. We're doing 1 a week. We hope at some point to start doing 2 a week, but let's see how this plays out. Okay, good night, everybody. Have a great day.